Welcome everybody to another edition of In the Garden. Today we're going to be working on getting an area of our garden that's been recently plowed, tilled, and ready for planting. Today we'll be planting cabbage, broccoli, kale, potatoes, and onions, to name a few. Today we'll also be doing a soil test. So yearly you want to test your garden soil for two items: fertility and pH. To start today, we want to go ahead and till a section of our garden to get it ready to plant these cool weather crops. Let's get started.
Here comes the tiller!
Now ideally we want our plowed garden to be a little bit drier than it is now, but we're fighting against time. So today we have a day to take care of getting our early harvest in. We have to take advantage of it. So in this instance we're going to just do the area of the garden here that we will be focusing on today and letting the rest of it dry out more before we do till it. We'll also utilize this garden space, more shade up front. From the larger evergreen reaches this area, so we'll put our plants that like more shade there, and full sun like potatoes and onions out farther in the garden. As we've gone through the garden a few more times with the tiller, now I'm starting to rake piles of the organic matter and that has taken hold over the winter. So we'll get these into piles, get a pitchfork, get what we don't want in the garden into the wheelbarrow and into our composting system to reintroduce back into the garden. And Michelle is just about finished raking flat the area that we've tilled a few times. So we are almost ready to start planting this section.
Something else we've been doing for the past couple years is helping clean up the grounds here at the farm. You can see Michelle's pulling from the pile of brush that we've accumulated over the years and burning it. We'll use those ashes as well in our compost pile. And while we're talking about compost piles, here are the 3 simple bins that we put together last year. So the idea here is bin number 1, everything fresh goes into this one. Bin number 2, we'll take everything out of bin number 1, and in bin number 2, we'll begin to rotate it as well too. Flip it over to speed the decomposition. Bin number 3, where the final product goes, everything that's ready to go into the garden and around our plants.
When researching composting bins, you'll find a lot of information about what to put in, what not to put in, temperatures and such. We have a simple rule. It just had to have been recently alive, but not an animal. Testing the pH and the fertility of your soil. So to do this, we're going to use an electronic fertility and pH tester and soil in this container. Let's get started. First, we're going to get about 4 cups of soil. And to do this, to get an accurate reading, we're going to dig about 6 inches down and remove any organic material from the soil. Okay, so we're digging a little hole. And this is where we'll start collecting our soil sample. Okay, so we got about 4 cups. let's proceed to the next step. Now we're going to add water to our soil. Here's the consistency we're looking for. A muddy mixture, and everything is thoroughly saturated. Okay, so we've let our soil set for 15 minutes, and we don't have any standing water on the top. First, we'll test our fertility. Move the tester to that setting and insert it. Now we have to let this sit about another 10 minutes. Okay, for the fertility test, we are in the ideal range. Next, we'll move the selector to pH and test this top graph. For the top graph, ideally we want to be around 7 for a pH level. We'll move that and wait about 2 minutes. Okay, so we've waited about 2 minutes, and we see our pH on the top here is right almost at 7, which is ideal. Okay, so it's time to start planting our potatoes first. Potatoes like the full sun, so we'll put them back out here where the garden does get full sun. For our potato patch, we're going to use these stakes to form off a squared grid to plant inside of. For our potatoes, these are what we saved from our harvest from last year. So here we have all our potatoes ready to plant, and we can see where we have nice eyes on the potatoes. We also cut these 3 days ago. It's important to cut them so you leave at least one eye on each half quite a few days before you plant. This allows the cut part to dry, and Mr. Potato Plant is less susceptible to rotting in the ground that way. Okay, so we have about 100 potato plants to plant today. So we'll go ahead and dig our first trench, and that'll give us a guesstimate of how long our trenches need to be for this area. So what Jacob's doing here is he's opening the rows up a little bit more. He's already gone back up once, and he's going to go down again to get the desired depth for Mr. Potato. Mr. Potato wants to be in the ground about 3 to 4 inches. And when we plant, we're going to plant them with the eyes facing up. Alright, we're putting the potatoes in, evenly spaced, 12 to 18 inches apart, with the eyes facing up. You want to look for any potato pieces that have rot on them or mold. We'll go ahead and just get rid of him. And any soft potatoes, you want to get rid of them as well. They will not grow. Next on the list to plant today are our onions. Onions want more sun, so we'll be putting them in next. We have red onions, white onions, and yellow onions. And we've also learned how to dry the onions and make them last through the winter. And if you can see the weight and what we pay for these, the yield what we receive is incredible. Next, we're setting a rows for our onions. Jacob's hoeing the rows open, and Michelle's loosening the soil in the rows.
Is that open?
Let's do red, white, and yellow. That way it'd be kind of patriotic. And here are what onion bulbs look like. All right, lastly, today we'll be planting our cool weather crops here in the front of the garden where it gets a little bit more shade. In this area, we'll be planting broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage. So we'll start with the broccolis first. This here we have 3 different broccolis that we've started from seed. We're going to put the Everest in first, and then when we get the garden more tilled, a little bit further down the shade, we'll put in our Pac-Man and our Sun. We want to keep them apart so they don't cross-pollinate each other. So we had started our broccoli in small seed cups, and once they got about 3 or 4 weeks old, we moved them to these larger planters. And what's nice about these cups are we could just rip the bottom off of the cup and plant the whole cup into the ground. Dig a hole, rip the bottom of the cup off, here we can see the root structure exposed, and plant the whole cup. Next we'll put in our kale. And lastly, our Brussels sprouts. And that about does it for today's planting. So we want to thank you all for joining us. I hope you found this informative and you learned something. And let's see pictures of your garden too. Please share what you've got started, what you're doing. We'd love to see it and hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.